House Speaker Mike Johnson is trying to hold his Republican conference together and prevent any small factions from sinking his party's sweeping agenda. His efforts come amid warning signs from both hardliners and moderates as lawmakers return to Capitol Hill today. Let's get right to CNN's Lauren Fox, who joins us now with some new reporting. You know how much we love new reporting, Lauren. What have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, it's really go time for several of the House's key committees as they begin to move forward with Donald Trump's agenda. They're going to hold key hearings today on Capitol Hill in the powerful Ways and Means Committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee, as well as in the Agriculture Committee. And they're going to be looking at making some sweeping changes to the country's food stamp program, to Medicaid, as well as making sure that some of Donald Trump's signature items from the 2017 tax bill are renewed, alongside some new proposals, including a temporary effort to try and stop taxes on tips and taxes on overtime. So those are the kinds of policies that they're going to be moving forward with today. But the task ahead for the House Speaker is one that is going to be massive. And that is because he is really trying to hold together a very fragile coalition in the House of Representatives. He has conservatives who are unhappy with this proposal, arguing that they need to see significant changes. They're very disappointed with the fact that they think leadership should have gone further in some of the Medicaid cuts. This is one of those conservatives, Chip Roy of the House Freedom Caucus. He said, "I remain open-minded because progress has been made based on our forceful efforts to force change, but we cannot continue down the path we've been going down, and we will need significant additional changes to garner my support." Meanwhile, the Speaker is also trying to work with some New York Republicans who have been adamant that they want to see a bigger increase in the state and local tax deduction for their constituents back home in a state like New York, which has a lot higher taxes locally. They are arguing that the 30,000 cap that they want to increase the 10,000 cap to is not high enough, and they are willing right now to stand in the way of this effort. So the committees are going to be doing their work today, likely through the night into the morning tomorrow. Then we expect at the end of the week the Budget Committee could cobble this all together. Then next week is that true test when this could go to the floor for a vote. I did talk to the Speaker a few minutes ago. He said that he was very optimistic they're going to stay on track this week. So we'll see.
So let's get more now on the budget battle. On Capitol Hill today, House Republicans are set to begin voting on a package of spending cuts as GOP leaders roll out details of President Trump's tax plans. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Ryan Zinke. He sits on the House Appropriations and Foreign Affairs committees. So I got to just ask you this, because as you know, the average American looks at what's happening in Washington, and no matter who is in charge, they see hypocrisy. And in this case, Republicans, as you well know, attack Democrats for spending too much, even though the national debt has gone up under both parties. Is it hypocritical for Republicans to punt on the debt limit for another few years so you can pay for Trump's tax cuts?
I think the debt limit is a serious issue. And to me, it's a simple balance sheet. Whatever we find in savings, and believe me, we can find savings. We had $2.5 trillion comes out, $3.5 trillion. Remember, that's over 10 years. So that's, if it's $3 trillion of savings, that's $300 billion a year on a $7 trillion budget. So whatever we find in savings, I am good of making sure America's not faced with the largest tax increase. But it's a balance sheet. Whatever we find in savings, that's put towards the taxes, so the provisions, but that's not going debt doing it. And I agree with J.D. Vance. It's the litmus test, the report card for this is how are we doing on the bond rate, because that's interest, which we all pay. And look, if we can't control our spending, then you know what? Interest rates will go up. A third of our finance is funded by central banks in other countries. And interest rates means a lot to everybody. That's your mortgage payment. That's your car payment. That's what the government pays for interest, which is now over $1 trillion a year. So let's make sure we balance the budget to the degree we can and control our spending.
But as you know, some of the more conservative members in your caucus are saying we're not balancing the budget. You have GOP Representative Chip Roy, who says the current draft of this bill still leaves more than $20 trillion in additional debt in 10 years. Do you share his concern? What do you say to that?
I am concerned. I think America is concerned that we're just adding debt and debt and debt. And we all pay it. When we pay an interest rate that's inflated, you pay it on your mortgage, your car insurance, and the government pays it on their $1 trillion a year. So I am all about savings. Let's find savings. Let's make the hard decisions, because we should. And Congress for a long, long time has been punting on these hard decisions. And now it's not time to punt. Let's face it together. And this should be bipartisan and make sure we control our spending.
So, as you point out, there will be some hard decisions. The challenge for Speaker Johnson is getting a consensus. And a big part of this plan is, of course, extending Trump's tax cuts from 2017. There was a major study done from the U.S. Congress Joint Committee on Taxation, and it showed that the 2017 corporate tax cuts delivered almost no real wage benefits to the vast majority of workers. Almost all the gains went to the top 10% of earners. That's just with the corporate tax cut, to emphasize that. What do you think about this idea of taxing the wealthy as President Trump has floated?
Well, I'll go back to probably Benjamin Franklin. The merchant should not pay the same as the candle maker. And even Teddy Roosevelt said the more you make, the more you have an obligation to pay to protect the system that allowed you the opportunity to make more money. So, I'm good at the higher rates as long as we have an incentive to make money. We're not a socialist country. But we have to look at it. And, the corporate tax rate is not in play because that's already in law. The provisions we're facing are things like the small business deductions, research and development, deductions for married and single, the death tax if you have a small farm out there. And if we don't correct it, then we're going to lose every farm, and ranch in Montana because you just don't have the money to recapitalize. There's a lot in there for the middle class. I support President Trump's idea that, look,
So how much would you be willing to do in terms of taxing the wealthy?
Well, I'd have to talk to Jason Smith, who's doing a great job, by the way, in Ways and Means. But I do think you go back to the principles: is the more you make, the more obligation you should pay. As long as you keep the incentive to make money, to do good, to provide, and the wealth in this country, it's there. But I'm also concerned about the middle class. I mean, there's a lot of struggling people in Montana. There's a lot of struggling people around this country that live check to check, that can't afford the gas, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think everything is on the table, but it goes back to, let's make sure we have a balance sheet that whatever we save, and I'm about savings, let's make sure we roll those over the taxes so we don't get a tax, bill, especially the middle class and businesses.
On Capitol Hill today, as you know, Congressman, House lawmakers are beginning votes on a package of spending cuts. As you know, Medicaid spending has been a target for some Republicans. Are there any changes to Medicaid you would support?
Well, I strongly oppose the Republican Party's more than $700 billion cut on Medicaid. There's no congressional district in America that depends more heavily on Medicaid than mine. 67% of my district is enrolled in Medicaid. And people should know that Medicaid is not only health care for the lowest income, it is increasingly long-term care for the disabled and the elderly and the chronically ill. So make no mistake, these Republican cuts are an attack on the most vulnerable people in our society, the elderly and the vulnerable. I'm in favor of reforms that would make the program more efficient, but I'm not in favor of what the Republicans are doing, which is taking a machete to the most important safety net for the most vulnerable Americans.
Congressman Richie Torres of New York, as usual, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.